Welcome back to CLARITY.SHOW podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and best practices with leading industry experts. I am Sergey Yermakov, your host for today's episode, and today my guest is Frank Sohn. Frank is the president and CEO of Novus CPQ Consulting and the man behind the Configure Price Quote podcast. Today we're turning things around a little bit, having Frank as a guest instead of the host. Thanks for joining, and I will let you introduce yourself before we start.
Hey, Sergey, very excited to be with you today. So I have been working in what's now called Configure Price Quote since the mid-90s. I started initially on a project where I was the development lead. And then I was asked to take care of the business aspects as well. I loved it, stayed with it ever since, have done that from the business and from the IT perspective. Was with HP, IBM, PwC, Juniper Networks before I founded Novus CPQ in 2015. And the focus really is on two parts. 50% is industry analysis. And that's the podcast as a part of that one, as well as we also have a subscription on that. And the other part is helping customers find the right solutions or answer any kind of CPQ questions that they have, right? So that's the main thing. And I have hand-on experience with a bunch of different tools. And I live an hour north of Denver in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Okay, so we can say that you have been in the CPQ space from almost the very beginning of like the CPQ as the product, as the motion.
For some time, yes. So that's true.
Okay, so and like the question I always have is, and probably a lot of your guests has as well. So how you came up with this idea? Because you started the podcast, I think 5 years ago, right? So it was not a very popular, format of like doing the interviews. So how you came up with this idea of starting the podcast?
No, the idea was really because I thought more people need to know a little bit more about it to make these tools more useful, right? So I saw from the beginning when we worked with these tools, it was you have to find the information yourself. You don't know who else is working in this area. You always think you're the only one who's doing that. That's not true. As you can see, there are many firms out there that are working on this topic. You can benefit from their knowledge, from their insights, right? And make the whole implementations easier, which I think then in turn will also make these applications more popular because they have a ton of value, right? So it's just a question on how you approach this. And I was hoping to help more people to make it a little bit more approachable.
Yeah, I think you have achieved like a tremendous result from the perspective that you are able to really show the CPQ space from all the different angles, all the different vendors, and all the ideas that people are sharing. Like it's really insightful. And coming like back also to your CPQ experience, I think that when you have started working with the CPQ, it was just in the very beginning of the CPQ. I mean, moving from the configurator and pricing probably into the application that shaped into that 3-letter acronym. So what was your first experience and how like CPQ systems looked at that point of time and how you see them evolving to the state where we have them now?
Now, I think honestly, they have made big steps, right? So initially I thought that was really meant for a small circle of experts who talk almost like a secret language and nobody really cares, right? It just has to work. It was mostly about the product configurator. It was much more technical, which for me was fine as a start, right? Since I came from the technical side. But I think it also excluded many people to buy more into it, right? So then it looks like expert stuff. And why should I look into this? There are other people who do that. I think right now, a lot of these solutions are much more approachable. They are also much nicer to look at, right? So it's the user interface are not that clunky anymore. I mean, some of them still are, but in overall, I would say this has improved quite a bit. And I think also the solutions have expanded capabilities considerably, right? It's not your mid-90s configuration tool anymore. There are many other capabilities in there. So you have to think a little bit broader. It's more accessible to people and it's more powerful in general, right? So I think a whole ton of things have happened that are all Not all, but most of them are really beneficial. I think what's a little bit the challenge is that you have so many of these solutions, because for anyone who's not really into the topic, it's like, oh my goodness. So there are 120 was the last listing I made, and I left out a whole bunch of solutions, right? So which I don't regularly see, but there are at least 120 different solutions. How do I find the right one for me? I don't want to make a 6 months project just to find the solution and then start paying real money when I buy software licenses and I have to implement it, right? So it's, I think, that lots of things have changed, and a lot of it for the better, but there are also some remaining challenges with that.
Yes, I think is if we look at the from configurator perspective, I think that large vendors, they have multiple configurators. I think that if we count them together with the CPQ, we could get even higher figure than 120, probably. But getting back to challenges, so how do you see? Because like it is a big difference. So we have also like participated recently in the configuration workgroup meeting, and I see that like a clear difference between the people who are looking purely at configuration side versus the people who are looking more at the business from the business perspective and also from the sales perspective on the CPQ as the tool. So what do you see these like challenges businesses are facing with the CPQ adoption, and how do you think they manage to overcome them?
So the adoption, so you already mean, okay, I already selected the solution, I have something, now it's about to get people to actually use the solution, right? So that to me is a challenge all by itself. That's something that has to typically start early, right? So that's also things that people typically don't take very seriously at the beginning, because you have a business problem, you want to fix that. So, and whatever that problem is, you're shipping products that don't work because the configurator didn't work, you send it at the wrong price, or whatever you did, right? So you had the business problem. So now how you start the whole project, I think, is indicative of how the adoption will be. If you just have a small circle of leaders who decide that they want to use the tool, and they pay for the project and they start going ahead, then you have a very good chance of having a tool that's probably doing all kinds of stuff which nobody uses, or only a small circle of people uses, right? So I think one of the keys is initially to get buy-in, meaning you have a couple of different teams that will be involved in any CPQ project, right? So that is your sales teams, your operations teams, your product management team, if you have a pricing team, right, and potentially marketing and finance also, right? So with the subscription capabilities, you may have more teams involved than you think. And you should talk to all these teams from the start and let them know what to expect, and to get their buy-in, to not just charge ahead but all by yourself with executive decision. I think you obviously have to make some compromise. You cannot always wait until the last person agrees with your opinion as well. Otherwise, you don't get anywhere. But I think overall, it has to be more of a collaborative approach, and where you tell people right from the start what you want to do. You put senior people on it, because in order to have these people buy in, they have to have relationships to all the players, and they have to be taken seriously. So one example I see where people, or where customers go wrong, is they want to have junior resources in there, or they completely give it to a consulting company that's running this for them, right? And I think, hey, while it's always good to get outside advice from people who have lots of experience with that, you have to buy into this internally. If you at the beginning don't buy into the whole change management idea, why do you think your employees should buy into this, right? So to me, it's like, that's really the starting point, and it goes awry from there typically. So if you take everyone with you, you explain it to them, you have your internal resource, a senior internal resource that's spending time on this, regular time on this, meaning 1, 2, 3 hours every day, right? And every week. Over the duration of the project, I think you have a very good chance of getting adoption. If you just develop something and then at one point you're coming up and show people what you did and want them to use it, you come up with some measures where what I've seen is, I don't give you a lock on as a sales rep anymore, right? So if you're not passing this internal test to access the tools. There are always ways around it. And to be honest, companies want to sell. If you sell with the tool, if you don't sell with the tool, I am always interested to talk to customers at the end of the quarter and see how hard are you on this requirement, right? So you're letting a $1 million deal go because it's not used in your solution? I doubt it. So in this case, and there goes your whole credibility, right? So if you do that once, everyone will know about it, and nobody will be excited about using this tool. So this starts early. It's typically not taken seriously. But I think if you spend so much money on a project, take it seriously. Everyone will tell you the same thing. So it's not magic. It's nothing that's unknown. It's just common sense what you should do.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we seen many customers also who there are, from my perspective, there are two options: whether IT is selecting the system and then end users are not using it, or there is insufficient management decision or management support, executive sponsorship, you can call it like that, that leads to the business going into the circles during the selection of the system. As you correctly mentioned, so we have a lot of different components right now within the CPQ system that are not maybe going even beyond the classic functionality, like subscriptions, like extended price management, for example. And there will be definitely preferences between the pricing team, sales team, and business towards any of these components and different CPQ systems. Also, there are people who don't like UI, for example, and voting against the system is just an example. But yeah, I think it's extremely important.
Absolutely agree. Yep, that's the key. That's why you buy the solution. You want people to use it, so you should pay attention to these basic things really early on.
Yeah. Okay. So now I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you the question that I'm typically not asking on the show, but the one you are always asking your guests. So, what do you like to do outside of work, and what are your hobbies? I think that all your guests always wanted to ask you the same question.
Yep. No, I absolutely. So I love dogs, right? So I have had dogs since my early 20s, right? So and always had big dogs, and really like hiking with them, right? So I go typically on walks twice a day, so probably 1.5 to 2 hours each day anyway. I also love to go running, so I typically run every other day for around 5 miles. At the moment, I have to have a little break because I got a little foot injury, but I hope that's going to be gone soon because I'm already out now for almost a week, which makes me nervous. So it's I would like to go running again, but we'll do that. Hiking is another thing that I do regularly. So we're in the Rockies, so pretty close to a lot of hiking trails here. And then when I say hiking, is mostly 4 to 6 hour hikes, right? So or sometimes 8 hours, right? So depends. That's always exciting, especially if you do it in the early summer or in the late summer, right? So because lots of wildlife to see here in Colorado, so love that. I also go skiing as time permits, right? So there's a lot of ski resorts close by. The close one for me is 1.5 hours. Some larger ones is 2, maybe a little bit over 2 hours away. And then I love watching basketball as well, right? So right now is a very good thing. Proud to mention that the Nuggets are in the Western Conference Finals, and they just won the first game against the Lakers. Tonight is the second game, so I really hope they're going up 2-0. And that's something I follow regularly as well. So, and my son used to play basketball, so that's how we got into this, and it's really fun. Yeah, and otherwise I also have to work, right? So I don't have much more time than doing that.
Exactly. So different angles. Okay, that's super interesting, exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, and I assume you read a lot. Maybe you could just recommend some recent book you read, and you find it insightful to the listeners as well.
Yeah. Now, I read as much as I can. I typically read in waves, right? So I have a time, so 6 months where I read a book almost every other week, right? And then I have 6 months where I don't read anything. So right now, the last book I read was Jodi Picoult, was The Storyteller. That's something from the Second World War. And then I read a book with Lisa C., The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane. That's something I read a little while ago. There were some more books, but these were the last two that I remember right now. So, yeah, but always in waves. And right now I just had stopped reading again a month ago or so, because I need to focus on so many other things that I really enjoy before you go to bed, right? So you're reading for 2 hours. So it gives me different perspective. Always good.
I just recently realized that I am usually reading in the plane because, today, if you don't have internet, you are not able to work actually. And so I really realized that during the COVID, I've been reading less, and now when the travel is back, so I'm getting back to the to the normal, I would say, from that perspective.
That's good. At least you have a reason to read, right? So, and it's not all work related. So because I read a lot about CPQ stuff as well, right? So, but this one is more for relaxation. So
this doesn't count, I think. Yeah, it's work. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Okay, good, great. So very nice to know you better. But coming back to the CPQ, so you've been there in the industry since the very beginning, and so. Well, we discussed how the system has evolved, but how do you see they are getting even better in the upcoming years? What do you think is coming into the CPQ world? What kind of functionality CPQ systems will cover in upcoming releases, years?
Yeah. Now, and I think that's a very interesting topic because it's exciting on the one hand side. It's also a little bit concerning on the other. Let's start with the concern first, right? Because if you connect too many things to CPQ, it becomes too overwhelming, right? So then you almost don't want to start because you don't know, where does this whole thing end? How expensive is it? What do I really get out of it? Should I really do that, right? So I think that's a concern. I think you can overcome that because from my point of view, honestly, having done that now for almost 30 years, is like the benefits are really great. You have to get used to this. This is not the tool that you typically see the first time you say, oh, that's fantastic, I want to use it, right? So, but I see lots of people who fall in love with it over time. For users, and users is different. Users, you can see it once and you like it, right? So, but if you have to administer the tool, it will probably take a little bit of time. I think the core topics will still be important, right? So the product configuration capabilities, what kind of engine you use for that, the pricing capabilities. If you want to do anything special with pricing that the standard solution doesn't do, there's a lot of capabilities. You look there, and you could look at the quoting capabilities also, where you would say, hey, are we still issuing quotes on PDFs and then send emails back and forth on this one? Do we do that potentially on a little microsite or something, right? So I think these topics will stay important, but a couple of other topics that I can think of, I guess, is the machine learning part. That's gonna artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks, right? So I think there are more and more capabilities going into this. It has gotten a recent jolt by this ChatGPT, Google Bard, and others, right? So wherever you have generative AI and you think about how can you use that potentially in CPQ. I think this is all new. It's a lot of talk right now, and companies are trying to find easy to understand use cases where it's really beneficial. I think there are a couple of ideas out there which is worth monitoring, aside from what you already have today with the cross and upsell, potentially white space analysis and things like that. But I think that's definitely a topic everyone should expect that's going more into CPQ. You have some other things which you already see today, right? So with the subscription businesses, that's interesting for lots of folks also to change the model from a one-time sale to an ongoing sale, and how can I monetize this and make it beneficial for both sides, right? So that is also something that will definitely impact CPQ more going forward. And I think Then you have a whole bunch of other topics which are interesting if you're in the right industry. Is not for every user. So let's look at, for example, visualization. So you have something in 3D or augmented reality. It looks really sexy, right? So you can put it on a website. You can have a 360-degree view of the product and stuff like this. All very interesting things, but it's not interesting for everyone. So this visualization, for example, if I'm a software company, I don't need it. What do I want to show you? So and you have different things like that where you would say, yes, for certain part, it's interesting, but that's not general. So visualization is one thing. I would say you have more advanced pricing. I could give you much more guidance than you see in an average CPQ tool. Is that what you want? Is that because there is a whole bunch of decisions behind this, right? So where is the source data for this coming from? How do you make sure that's the same in CPQ and in your order management system, right? Especially if you have different solutions based on different platforms and stuff like this. So I think these are topics. You have the document management. You potentially have e-signature solutions. For lower level solutions, you could say, hey, that's integrated, right? So I'm selling you this in one solution. If you have more enterprise type of solutions, they probably prefer something more like a DocuSign, which has more capabilities, covers more use case and stuff like this. So I think you're adding lots of topics to CPQ, which may or may not be interesting for certain customers, but AI is definitely something. And then another thing which I want to mention is, especially in Europe, that seems to be interesting at this point, is the sustainability requirements.
Yes.
Now, only a small part of this is in CPQ, obviously, and I will have a special event about that here pretty soon for that. But that's something where you could also ask how much of this should be in CPQ, right? And what are the use case for this? So, but I think there's still lots of things that you could do. Simplify the topics that you hear anyway is like the omni-channel. So it's no longer just for salespeople. Your partners can use it. The end user can use it directly, and so on. So I think this is all at this time. I'm not sure, but it's almost like table stakes. You expect that anyway, right? So, and other capabilities, I think they are a little bit newer. You need to see how you can integrate them, but I think they will be very important. And for anyone who's looking at selecting a new CPQ or potentially changing, merging solutions, that's things I guess it's important to keep in mind to see what are the different roadmaps in these areas and what could help you most as a customer.
Yeah, so CPQ is slowly becoming the integrated suite of applications. So the biggest question for me is what functionality should be included in the CPQ stack, or what should be integrated with the CPQ? Like as you mentioned, omnichannel sales. Probably we have a number of different commerce solutions, and it would be easier to get all these integrations done instead of building like self-service portal, for example, for the end users. So, and also with AI, we have number the use cases that are currently evolving, like the guided product configuration, for example, or you have like this pricing capabilities, like dynamic pricing and things like that. And I think it is becoming more and more important for many customers.
Fully agree.
Okay. So, but if we are looking at the AI here with CPQ, I just wanted to explore it a little bit in more details. What kind of the application scenarios do you see with AI and CPQ?
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch. So let's start with the standard ones, right? So that's recommendations. As you're buying products, and now you want to recommend additional products with that. That's one of the promises of CPQ, that you would sell more, right? So now let's take that literally. Then I could say, okay, we could have the simple cases, which you have had for many years now, where you would say, hey, if you buy product A, I also recommend product B, right? Now, I can do that for a long time manually. Just think of it like an Excel spreadsheet, right? If I sell product A, I automatically select product B, which is fine. The problem is just if you have a ton of products and you have to maintain all of this stuff manually, right? So in this case, it's like, hey, this is becoming really hard because products go obsolete. And And how do I make sure that I always recommend something that's working if I maintain all of this manually, right? So it would be nice to have some automation in there, some artificial intelligence, right? So machine learning, where it would say, hey, find out dynamically what is sold. So instead of me maintaining it, I want you to give me these proposals, right? So if you do it often enough, it makes sense. So that doesn't make sense, obviously, for everyone. If you only have a small set of product, and if you don't do it very often, I would prefer to do it manually and then also not pay for things that I don't need. If I use it very often, I want to automate it, right? So these are things which have been out there for a while. I could also say I want to have knowledge for aftermarket services, where I would say I'm selling you this machine, and every 5,000 products, whatever it is, right? So then at certain intervals that are dynamically determined, I need to have a maintenance. So I want you to notify me ahead of that so that I can do the maintenance before it actually happens, right? So, and even before that maintenance happens, maybe I need to give you a training class to show you how to do that in your machine, because you could do it yourself or you can hire a service technician to do it for you, right? So these are things which are already out there today. I think they are good. They only make sense for a certain kind of user, right? So it doesn't make sense for everyone to do that. But these are things which are already out there. So now when you look forward, where you could use more artificial intelligence, machine learning going forward, the areas that I would think of as for visual, for example, you could say, I could generate backgrounds for certain sales scenes, right? So where I would have internally a graphical artist, which is putting all this together for me. These people cost money, right? So now it's not a big savings if I generate the background automatically, but I could potentially look into integrating with applications like DALL-E, right? And see if I can generate this. I know a couple of folks who already do that, and they will save a little bit of money by reducing the hours they need for graphical artists, right? I think another very interesting area is, and people have, the CPQ vendors have talked about this for years, but what's very interesting is to say, hey, I could also generate rules, right? So because
Yes.
like you, when you work with SAP has lots of customers. They have written lots of rules. So when I write a rule, which is very similar to something somebody has already written, and I could automate this, now it's getting interesting, not from a customer point of view, but from an administrator point of view. Now that's something that the people who set up the configuration rules may not be happy about. And I think it's not mature yet, right? So, but I could reduce them and give them an opportunity to focus on other tasks. So, because to me is like, hey, if you generate me 100% of the rules, and I assume I have to review 10 or 20%, I could save time. Now, this whole thing has a wrinkle, obviously, right? So, because you could say, if you're writing 100% of the rules, how do I know which 10 or 20% I have to review? I have to review the whole thing. I'm not saving anything, right? So because, but that's the status right now. Let's assume that's progressing and making real progress, and you have a chance to do that. That would be really a breakthrough, right? So because now the maintenance becomes easier, it could become faster. It could become more aligned, instead of you giving out policies and every modeler has to follow these policies. And some people still like to do it a little bit different. Then also when you do an offering, it's always the same, right? So because it's generated the same way, it's following this at the beginning. I mean, it's still a pipe dream from my point of view, but that's where we can see a real transformative opportunity, right? So, and a couple of vendors work on this for a couple of years. Nobody has gotten it to work. Maybe that's worth another crack at it with these latest technologies. There's still, as I said, there's a bunch of concerns with it, because you would need to have the data secure, right? So I don't want to put my rules on something like a ChatGPT where everyone could access it and potentially hack it. So there's a whole bunch of concerns with that. Anyway, in addition to this administrative experience, I think there's a whole bunch of opportunity for artificial intelligence and machine learning and neural learning and as more with the guidance, right? So I could show you things. For example, what I mentioned earlier with sustainability, I could say, hey, I want to, for whatever reason, let's say for tax reasons, certain products that are sustainably developed get lower taxes. And I want to buy these products with the lower taxes, not because I'm environmentally conscious, because I want to save money. So this one is also something where I could use this help, right? Where I could say, hey, how can I find this? How can I get dynamic guidance on this? Especially if something changes. So I think there's a whole world of opportunity with that. At this time, the challenge is still, the expectations are probably met much higher than what you would really get out of it. So I think it makes sense to really think a little bit about it first. Do you really need that? Because not every customer needs it. If you decide you need it, I think you need to really have 1-2 use cases where you want to use it and really try them first and see if your expectations can be met. And then I would say take it from there. If you see it's all a little bit too much hype and it's not working the way you wanted it for whatever reason, then you can back out again. But I think it has a ton of promise. To me, is very excited. But also keep in mind, I look at it 50% from an industry analyst point of view and think that that's a topic where we'll probably see a ton of changes over the coming years, because that's also something where you can have transformative capabilities coming up in the future. But just to close on this, I still see lots of customers struggling with the basic CPQ stuff. So instead of getting overly excited about stuff that's coming next year, I would say focus first on the stuff that you can use this year, and that gives you a benefit this year before you get too excited about the next thing.
Yes, I totally agree with you, because like CPQ, from my perspective, it is a productivity increase for like different areas of the business. And I think that it would make sense to first get the first wave of this productivity increase and then start thinking about the future. And yeah, I think also with a lot of new people coming into the industry, I think that this is the interesting challenge for younger generation to solve when they start working on and with CPQ systems. So if we're looking from that perspective on the people who are joining the industry, what you would recommend newcomers? What would be advice from you?
No, I think it's an exciting opportunity also for newcomers, right? I think is the first thing you should do is question things, right? So get to the bottom of it. It's not just taking information and sometimes it's good to get new eyes on it, get new ideas, come up with new approaches, right? So I think it's the first thing you need to have is you have to have a base understanding really what it means, right? So and product configuration, pricing, and from two perspectives, what it means from two perspectives, right? So one is if you're an administrator and you set up the rules, that's one point of view. That's good. That's probably easier for someone coming from university, because that's it would have done before, right? So there's knowledge behind it. There's a way on how you do it. You set it up, and that's it. But you also have to think about the people who use the tools, right? So to get them to do all these things and to do it in a uniform way, right? So because it's like, hey, it's great if you do all these new things, but how do I know about it? How do you keep me up to date without overwhelming the user, right? So, and I think that's something that sounds very simple, but this I think is a very hard part. This is more the design part where you get the buy-in also. And I think I would hope that lots of folks who start with this now get some new ideas how that could be simplified so that you get more users to adopt the tool, right? So, and I think there are so many opportunities where people can specialize over time as well. I think is initially I would look at the whole bunch of different solutions as much as you can, because you will start in an industry, in a company, and they will not use all the tools, right? So, but I think for me, at least, it worked out to have first this kind of overview, how things work in general, before you specialize on something, right? So that, and I think because you have if you're in the manufacturing industry, for example, you could look at really how is the Internet of Things, right? So how could that be integrated with CPQ, and how can I, because then I have a whole bunch of different things where I could say, hey, I'm selling you these aftermarket services. These aftermarket services rely on data from sensors in your machines. And how does that work, right? So very different than when you're trying to sell something on the software side. So I think get the general overview first and then specialize. I think there's so many different interesting areas. There should be something for most people to find where they want to specialize later on. But I think the overview initially is probably the most important one.
Yes, I agree. So I think that especially taking into account that majority of CPQ users are manufacturing companies and they all are moving into everything at the service direction, I think there are tons of like new ideas to explore, as you mentioned, usage and subscriptions and everything related to bundling of the different services and products and doing like predictive maintenance and things like that. So it's a lot of things to get to explore for the newcomers.
We're in wild agreement. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. So thank you very much. I think that we're getting like to the end of the episode. So I think that thank you for sharing. It was super insightful. I think that for listeners and for businesses as well. And yeah, so my pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. So yeah,
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. So yes, everybody, please subscribe to podcast to make sure you are not missing the new episodes, and go and subscribe to CPQ Podcast if you are not subscribed yet. I'm sure Frank is getting a lot of new guests and interesting insights on his show. And thank you for watching and listening.
Thank you very much.